Would you consider a company that requires being in the office 5 days a week is old-fashioned? For all the jobs I've seen in this line of work, 95% of them are either fully remote or offer hybrid working. A company that requires staff to be in the office 5 days a week, do you think they will also show other bad practices or old-fashioned working culture? Would you consider it a bit of a red flag in the modern world? 5 days a week in a shitty open space workplace with 25 people around me? Heck no. I do that 2 days a week and I get out of these days with headaches. Give me a silent location to work at, as we used to have 10 years ago, and I would maybe not turn it down. When you're around tech support, project managers, business analysts, managers, and all of them are on teams and different meetings, it's just impossible to get anything done. What is the team workplace? That's how my company is. Have always hated the open space, and our newer office is even worse. Absolutely no sound barriers anywhere on the floor. It's always loud. There is so much movement that it always distracts me. And since we are hoteling, I can't even set up a desk the way I want, or guarantee that I can get a desk in a spot I like. I get really uncomfortable if people are moving around behind me. That, and everyone keeps getting sick and still coming in. I went into the office for a few weeks, and my work was suffering, wasn't getting much done. Talked with my manager and got to work from home, especially as almost my whole team isn't in the same location. Just sitting around a bunch of random people I have no connection to and being distracted by them. Exactly this. I feel like the request for me to be in the office at least once a week, I'm a developer, is pretty much so that client managers and salespeople can ask me questions at their leisure and on their terms, distracting and interrupting my concentration. Not to mention the constant noise, calls, and movement. I don't mind it if it's a day of meetings, but if I've been asked to come in for the whole day when all I'm scheduled for is coding, production work, I just feel like I'm distracted and ineffective. I don't even have that type of interactions. The only thing that comes out of being in the office is hearing the random stuff everyone else is working on, which can rarely prove to be useful. Reminds me of my company when they asked everyone if they wanted to return to the office. One person said everyone just puts on headphones anyways and rarely talks unless they need something. That comment was like a nail on the coffin for returning to the office. I've been a software engineer for over 20 years at this point, and it used to be so different. I've had various layouts, from cubicles in a quiet space, cubicles in a loud space, private office where you can close the door, and open floor offices with everyone sitting across from each other at long tables. That last one is the worst by far. It's only done that way because it's cheaper. Anything they say about collaboration is nonsense. At least for me, the distractions are overwhelming, even with headphones on listening to music. People moving all over the place in my peripheral vision distracting me from what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, all of that is behind me now. I've been remote for over a decade now, far before the pandemic, and I'm keeping it that way. If I want an open floor plan workspace, I'll take my happy ass to Starbucks to work. Same level of noise and distraction. In fact, Starbucks is probably less distracting and loud since, at least in my country, people tend not to make a noise in a Starbucks, and the vibe is usually quite relaxed. Wow. Gens really fuck up. You wouldn't survive back in days. They can require it, but I wouldn't be going for those jobs unless there was anything else available. The 2 days a week I do in the office are more than enough. Unless I'm desperate for a job, money, I will never choose to work 5 days a week in an office again. The order I consider a job is remote, hybrid, on-site. On-site is only if I need the money, then leave as soon as I find a better one. I honestly don't see the reason why we need on-site developers. We use Zoom meetings anyways, even in the office. All it does is make everyone waste resources, come into the office, and feel miserable. By the time I commute to the office, my energy is already gone. I am distracted most of the time with other people than actually doing work. My CTO has been mad about our performance after switching to a 3-day on-site hybrid from fully remote. They really cannot figure out why the amount of fucks given about work went from sort of high to low. Many of us are starting to look for new jobs because they are saying if performance doesn't get better, they are considering fully on-site. We were remote for 3 years. I don't know who had the bright idea to pull us back in. Now it backfired, lol. The premise was, it wasn't fair for other departments that needed to work fully in the office. Lol. What a load of crap. The idea was a collaboration between an entire cadre of waste of skin, middle management oxygen thieves, scared spitless that remote workers will demonstrate with their continued, improved productivity how entirely worthless micromanaging assholes are to the business's bottom line. Senior executives, C-suite types, bitter that none of their peon underlings come to pay court to them in their wood-paneled executive suites with their personal assistants and private conference rooms, and instead, they just look like everyone else with a fake digital background on the Zoom calls. Those same C-suite types, whose fat investment portfolios have been taking it in the shorts as commercial real estate tanks nationwide, who are all in collaboration with one another to return workers to the office, regardless of how much it has improved productivity and worker satisfaction with work-life balance. Also, cities give companies tax breaks dependent on them bringing workers into the city. This is an underrated comment, but so true. The smokescreen is pay. The root cause is money through tax incentives. When you take away all of the kids' recess, you just have a bunch of pissed-off kids. For me, a programmer, it would be a huge red flag. May I ask why? I understand why it isn't what everyone would want. But isn't it just a personal preference thing? If the people that work there are happy with it, then they're probably willing to hold out for someone who enjoys that kind of environment. Cubes are terrible for programming. No one gives programmers offices. It's all about being able to have large blocks of time with zero interruptions. Hearing people talking in the next cube is enough to interrupt. After an interruption, it takes, an average, per studies, 15 minutes to get back in the zone. The last in-office job I had, you could hear people clearly 2 rows over. Yes, there are people who prefer an office. Good for them. Now that we are hybrid, I've had to sit around people, all in a meeting at their desk, but one person at home. Every time this happens, I go for a coffee break. They could have just stayed at home and done the same thing. In my team, we have a designated day in the office, so this very rarely happens. Yeah, we do too. We all go in Thurs, and this still happens. I look left and right and behind me, and I'm like, they're in the same freaking meeting. You know what we used to do? Go to a meeting room and dial in on the phone for the other person. Plenty of developers would kill for a cubicle. If you want to experience hell, try developing on a hot desk in an open-plan office. Bonus points if some sales guy is sitting next to you, loudly calling all day. I've done that too. It totally sucks. No cube, long IKEA table, programmers on both sides, CEO talked about the collaboration. Yeah, right. It sucked. I would just bring in my headphones and listen to something that helps me focus. Classical, jazz, piano, deep house, basically anything without lyrics. But if I'm looking for strategies to block out my coworkers so I can focus, maybe it's better to just work from home. That doesn't stop someone from walking up and tapping you in the shoulders. Plus, are all coworkers truly in the same office, though in offshoring and you're on Zoom, Teams, Slack anyway? Been there, done that. The team I worked with when COVID happened became way more productive when we moved from in-office to fully remote. The last job offer I had for in-office, 2 years ago, programmers literally had to punch a clock, including forced lunch times. Yes, red flags. Agreed. Ass in seat time is a terrible performance metric. I bet they also demanded a certain number of lines of code. Punching clocks is the worst, but not all on-site companies are like that. That said, I am a programmer at a 100% remote company, and in the last 6 months, I've had multiple programmer coworkers who have left because they hate remote work and wanted to go back to an in-person office. So you personally wouldn't work well in that environment, but someone might really like that. That doesn't make it a red flag. That makes it a strong personal preference, which is fine, but someone will see a fully on-site job and go, cool, normal job. Oh my God, what is it with you people and this knee-jerk need to defend office work? No one is going to force you to work from home. What some companies are trying to force is for people to work in the office every day of the week. People should have the option. I've said repeatedly that you don't have to apply to an on-site job if you don't want it. My point is just that it isn't a red flag. If you need to work from home or if it's a personal requirement for any reason, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that a job that's fully on-site is toxic. It just means it isn't for you. On to the next 50 remote jobs on the list. Someone will take that on-site one eventually, and that's fine. Edit. Also, for the record, I strongly prefer working from home, but I've worked in toxic workplaces that were fully remote and fully on-site, and great workplaces that were fully remote and fully on-site. What makes it toxic is rarely the location. I can't even work with my office door open and the TV going in the other room. I'll be deep in a thought process, and all of a sudden a line from the TV or kids or wife, etc., will say or do something, and poof. There it goes. Now I'll be spending the next 30 minutes trying to get back into the groove I had before. There are two states of noise I can work effectively in, and that's peace and quiet or music without lyrics, preferably higher BPM. JP from Grandma's Boy is sort of a weirdo, but that's basically me in the zone. Isn't it just a personal preference thing? But we're talking about it being mandatory, the opposite of personal choice. The flag is your boss, don't trust you. Working on site doesn't always mean the boss doesn't trust you. It absolutely can mean that, but it isn't a certainty. There are a lot of jobs in and out of tech that literally can't be done remotely, and doing them on site doesn't mean that you have a boss that doesn't trust you. If you only want a remote job, then that's fine, but the people that work on site aren't always there simply due to it being mandatory. That literally can't be done remotely. Do you think we are talking about those jobs? You yourself even mentioned personal preference. We're talking about development jobs, and I get that. What I'm saying is that there are lots of reasons a company would want people on site and why people would want to work on site that don't involve it being mandatory or a toxic manager. Again, if you want to only work remotely, then that's fine, but assuming a workplace is toxic due to them wanting everyone on site is a massive assumption. Are you a manager? No, and I'm not advertising a job. I am, however, still confused because I think there's a false equivalency being made here between a less than ideal situation and a red flag. When I think red flag, I think entry-level, master's degree, and 5 years of experience type of workplaces, not 100% on-site. That's your red flag. I would consider a mandatory 5 days on premise as a red flag, if only for myself. I don't want the kind of job that needs me every day in there. I want the kind of job where I'm given a task and I can focus on it without interruption. I don't want enough responsibilities that I become indispensable. I don't want to commute, at all, if possible, but as that's hard to negotiate, the less the better. Any job that would tell me, a programmer, that I'm required in office every single day would definitely not fulfill my expectations, so why would I bother applying? What is your point? You obviously have an opinion, so why don't you just say it? Stop beating around the bush, man. You sound like my director, saying a lot of words but nothing there. Not person you replied to, but here's some reasons. Companies that still require 5 days a week are highly likely to be clock Nazis. If you are 2 minutes late or leave 3 minutes early, they will know and hold it against you. Commuting is a supreme waste of time. Me personally, I can either use that time to sleep longer, be better rested, which correlates to better work product, or I could get on earlier instead of that time being for my commute. I personally enjoy what I do, so I'd probably get on earlier if I don't have anything else going on. X. Eat breakfast with kids, take kids to school instead of wife. Somewhat related to the last, no commute means more family time, which means, for me, being happier in the workplace. Requiring 5 days a week when we've had 1 to 2 years of proven time where WFH did not affect productivity, there's no reason to believe otherwise. I can probably rattle off a bunch more, but basically it's a boomer way of thinking. Collaboration can happen on Zoom, Slack, and other tools. You don't need random people walking up to your open-air cubicle bothering you every 15 minutes, breaking your concentration because it encourages good collaboration. CEOs that think this are out of touch and need to find a way to justify the 20-year lease they can't get out of, else it reflect bad on them. 2 days a week is more than enough. I'd even tolerate 3 days. But that's plenty of time to do catch-ups, have face-to-face meetings, get the collaboration from people they think is a must, and then use the other day's WFH for concentrated work efforts. There's too much distractions in the office. I love being in my corner, just typing away. Working from home, I don't mind having to hang back and get stuff done. But if you're making me go to the office, I'll be there 9 to 5:30 as required. WFH every day since March 2020. I've been promoted twice, and I've done overnight deployments, early starts, late finishes. Those would all go away if I was to be in the office. I love being able to take the kids to school, spend my lunch break with the wife, and seeing the kids grow up. I used to leave for work at 7 a.m. and get home for 7 p.m., so only saw the kids before bed and weekends. It sucked. I can probably rattle off a bunch more, but basically it's a boomer way of thinking. As a boomer programmer who's been working mostly remotely the past 15 years, I was agreeing with you up until the ageist, prejudiced, discriminatory remark. Okay, boomer. I really hope this doesn't come across argumentative, because I really don't mean it that way, but I haven't experienced what you're describing. I think you may have experienced some really toxic workplaces, so I get that we're probably talking from different perspectives. I think there are a lot of reasons why a company would want someone in the office 5 days a week. There could be others that work there that have jobs that require them to work on site, and they want everyone there in solidarity with them. For example, construction companies hire software developers for all sorts of things, and sometimes they want everyone to work on site in a branch, because it isn't like the construction workers have an option to work remotely. The developers might sometimes need to interact with other tech workers too. And those other people may need to work on site in order to rack and stack servers and the like, making it a lot easier if you're there to work with them. Or the company might just be kind of a great place to work, and people enjoy being there, so they want someone to join them. Again, that doesn't mean everyone would want that, but they'll hold out for the people that do. Also, there are some amazing jobs with companies that contract with NASA, for example, and they literally have to work on site because what they're making involves hardware, and there's only so much testing you can do in a virtual environment in that case. There are absolutely clock Nazis, but I'd hesitate to say that a company wanting people to work on site inherently makes that likely to be the case. There's a huge gulf between a company who needs to have people on site out of physical necessity and a company requiring it for made-up reasons. The very fact that the people who could work remotely during the pandemic did so without any loss in productivity, the opposite really, is evidence of that. The working in solidarity argument is pretty weak, IMO, but if that's a company's reason for having everyone in the office, that's fine. I just won't work for them. Besides, allowing those who can work remotely to do so eases the burden on people who cannot. If you told these guys in construction they could pick to have software engineers and typical office workers in their building or reduce their commute by 50%, do you really think they'd pick the former? I know many people who simply had to work in the outside world during the pandemic for physical or security reasons, and they absolutely loved it because there was basically zero traffic and much less distraction. I think there are a lot of reasons why a company would want someone in the office 5 days a week. There are two. One, they're locked into a real estate contract and want to see some kind of return on the investment. And two, this is the big one, there are too many middle managers who want their thumb on people's foreheads, not literally, to get things done instead of doing the more difficult things like building a trust environment. That doesn't check out for the people that work there, that work on site, out of necessity due to them doing something that literally can't be done remotely. Even if we're just talking about tech, there are people who have to rack and stack and make sure the server room has everything running properly, and they don't resent the fact that they have to work on site because they know they can't do everything from a virtual environment. I know they devs can do everything remotely, but I bring up this fact about others because they're evidence of the fact that you can work on site without it being a toxic environment, and they may enjoy it and want to find devs who are willing to join them. Meaning, if it doesn't work for you, then that's fine, but there will be developers who are happy with that and who will see it as just another normal workplace. I started out in hardware and worked my way into software through a tiny door that would open. I'd kick the door down and invite myself in. If I were still doing hardware, I'd love that most of the staff were remote. I'd come in, do my rounds, make sure things were running well, then guess what? I'd go home and monitor. I wouldn't sit around the office because I loathe people bugging me, even if I'm just sitting there monitoring. Most of us techies are like that, nearly all. Techies are introverted. It's a law of the universe. We can be nice, congenial, humorous, consoling, helpful, but when we're focused on something, we don't want to be bugged, and we don't like or want to be in an office if we're programmers and if we're hardware techies, no more than absolutely necessary. Again, that likely is true of most, but all any of us have to do is just not apply to on-site jobs. Red flag means toxic workplace ahead, not this doesn't match with my needs and/or preferences. I'm not saying you're under an obligation to apply to a job fully on-site, but I am saying that it being on-site will make someone very happy. It's a red flag because most places that require on-site with zero valid reasons, programming, are doing so for one, self-serving interests like their real estate contract locking them in, and/or two, middle managers who can't manage, even if the staff is all on site, but they can talk up a good story about how they observe the staff busily in their spaces. And now we've circled back to my original comment. Thank you. This has helped me to understand. It's a red flag for a web development programmer because the job can be done from home. I have a 3-day in-office mandate, and I spend it mostly on video meetings. You're bringing up things that are more general tech-related than web dev-related. If a web dev is fucking with server racks, they are either old as fuck and have been working there for 30 years, or stuck on literal 15-year-old legacy stack and can't upgrade. All good. Didn't take it that way. I think you may have experienced some really toxic workplaces, so I get that we're probably talking from different perspectives. Most definitely, you are not wrong. There are absolutely clock Nazis, but I'd hesitate to say that a company wanting people to work on site inherently makes that likely to be the case. I'd say it's an underlying motive, might be 30% of it, but it's definitely greater than zero, because in the end, you've got some middle manager who will be of the thought process that bodies in chairs means productivity, especially in larger companies. But I see your point of view on the other points, and while I agree with you about the collaborative aspects, I still think you can do all of that in 2 to 3 days. Situations of government contractors dealing with secret classified info aside. You don't need 5 full days where, depending on where you are, what major city you live near, people oftentimes have 45-minute to 2-hour commute. Happy workers make great products, and since the pandemic provided it is viable, there's just no need for it. I've been WFH since before it was cool, since 2013, so I am heavily biased. It is greater than zero. Absolutely. Toxic managers are a plague. I will certainly never argue that clock Nazis don't exist, or that there aren't managers who only want people on site because they're petty or insecure. I certainly prefer working from home, but I consider it exactly that, a preference. There are people who have to work from home due to a disability or family situation, and that's more than a preference. But all either WFH job seeker need do is not apply to on-site jobs. When I think of what makes a workplace toxic, I think of those job descriptions that advertise an entry-level position requiring a master's and 5 years of experience, and even some of those are remote. So therefore, a fully on-site job doesn't work for some people, and that's fine, but I wouldn't put it into the category of red flag. So therefore, a fully on-site job doesn't work for some people, and that's fine, but I wouldn't put it into the category of red flag. I would, in the year 2024, for any job that requires being in front of a computer all day. And instead of some people, I would say most people. Flipping it around, isn't it just a personal preference to ask workers to come into the office when their work can be performed just as easily from home? Yes, but they don't have to hire everyone. And if you don't want to work on site, then you don't have to apply to the job. If the people that work there like it, then it isn't a red flag. It just isn't what you want. I am totally fine with allowing for either. If a workplace requires 5-day work week on-site for web dev roles, they are old-fashioned, and this is very arbitrary because web dev in particular definitely doesn't necessitate on-site work. So if an employer is requiring it, it's a preference. Speaking anecdotally, I am much more productive and less stressed working from home than I was working on-site 6 years ago. It's really not just a mere preference. Okay, preference is the wrong word for you and many others. Calling it a requirement is fine for you and people like you who do not function well in an office or for any other reason have no interest in working on site. Just like that's a requirement for you, it is a requirement for some companies that everyone work on site, and they have their reasons for it as you do yours. Both are fine, and they're not upset that they can't work with you. So it doesn't have to mean anything to you that you can't work with them. Programmer can do more in home than in office. No meetings. No, hey, can you fix it? No task from boss like do this first, etc. Imagine you were hired as a forklift operator. Now imagine you have to do it on a beach. Can you do your job? Sure. Would some people prefer it? Yes. Is it antithetical to doing the best possible job? Yes. Isn't it a pretty recent thing that people did development from home? I'd say from the advent of the cloud. That's like 40 years of just working on site. I'm sure that timeline is off. If the pallets are on the beach, then I'm sure they'd say ahead of time, that's the type of forklift operation you'd be doing, and you'd have the right to not apply to it. I think it's dumb you're getting so downvoted. I think your question is fair and agree that it's mostly personal preference. I wouldn't consider it a red flag, but I would say the company is not for me. Right? Just don't apply to the job. No big deal. Someone will be thrilled with it. I wouldn't just consider it as old-fashioned. It would be a big red flag and possibly a deal breaker for me. It's 2024. And the idea that software engineers need to be in an office, that anyone does really, in order to be productive has been well and truly disproven. Heck, the Department of Labor just put out a new study this week saying that working from home did not reduce productivity in a wide range of jobs. Usually the reasons people push this are they work in a highly creative and collaborative field where ad hoc meetings are vital to the success on the job. This is not most jobs. Some exec somewhere wants to fill out the overpriced office they're renting and likes being able to see all their minions at the same time. A manager feels if their team isn't under their feet at all times, there's no way for them to ensure productivity and quality work. These are bad managers, by the way. One of these is a legitimate reason, and it applies to about 0.1% of the workforce. The other two are massive red flags. They work in a highly creative and collaborative field where ad hoc meetings are vital to the success on the job. I have more frequent ad hoc meetings since going remote, as I can get colleagues from different offices/buildings together at a moment's notice, virtually in a way we'd not have done in the old days of booking meeting rooms. My team also made it part of our culture to just jump in MS Teams, Zoom calls, to chat through stuff whenever possible, so we actually did see an uptick in pairing between engineers, which was hilarious to me. When I say highly creative fields, I mean literally creative teams and people that have to be constantly talking through things. When I was a designer, I was in more contact with other designers, just throwing ideas around than I am now as an engineer. And as I said, my team is pretty collaborative. This is a real thing, but it's actually somehow worse for the productivity of the person who is constantly being asked questions. "You free for 5 mins for a call?" is the most dreaded Slack message I can get. I feel like since the advent of Zoom Slack huddles, for some reason people are less likely to do some digging themselves when they know they can just get someone to solve it for them in a 5-minute Zoom call. The most painful is when you get in a call with someone, and their question could have easily been asked in 2 paragraphs via async message, but now you're pulled completely out of whatever flow you were in before you hopped on the call. When I became lead, I made it clear to my manager and PM that I was running on 50% time until further notice. When they asked why, I said, "Because people are going to interrupt me all day long, and I want to make sure I have the time to actually help them if they need it." PM wasn't happy. Manager backed me 100%. Our velocity went up. Turns out there's value in having a person who does not directly contribute value. I agree partially. It's good to be available to a teammate when they are at a true dead end. But if it's happening a lot, this strategy presupposes that the throughput gain of you solving their problems the moment they get stuck is greater than the loss of productivity on your part, which I doubt is the case in every instance. Obviously, not every developer is going to produce the same output, even if they're all equally unstuck. I also don't know the dynamics of your specific team, but there's certain developers that would become more valuable to the team in the long run if they didn't get in the habit of using a teammate as a crutch like this before first digging into the problem themselves. This problem isn't even that bad on my team, so I'm not sure why I'm soapboxing about it. Raffle. If someone is asking for help a lot, there definitely is an aspect of, "You clearly need better training. How can I give it to you?" It also depends on the seniority level. Seniors should be able to run broadly autonomously, but juniors might need help on things all the time. As you say, different engineers are different, and we should evaluate if it's a problem on a case-by-case basis. This problem isn't even that bad on my team, so I'm not sure why I'm soapboxing about it, Rofel. Because we've all been there. We know this pain. Even if we don't live it now, we remember. The scars never go away. Not really. The only other good reason I've seen, the work is highly secured, security critical, and you need to work on physically secured and air-gapped with station, SOBOL, that can't possibly be remoted into. That's also a very valid reason. But as with Noble One, that's not going to be nearly as many people. Most companies are good enough with an encrypted laptop and mandatory VPN use, I'd imagine. Yes, as an aging millennial, there's some value to face-to-face time, but not 40 hours per week. 1 day per week to twice per month is valuable to ideate, hash out problems, get to know each other a little better, etc. Anecdotally, I've been freelancing for 7 years, and the projects where we occasionally get together usually run more smoothly. But some office environments are also completely unproductive, even once a month. I have been working from home for a decade now. For the ideation acclimating to a new team, it is essential to the point I have to preemptively budget it into projects. It is very expensive to get even small teams out to a central location. There's a ton of missed communication over phone or worse, video calls. For junior people, they may not recognize the value, But every senior person I know wants this, and the problem is more that all senior people are stretched thin on multiple projects. How are video calls worse for missed communication than voice calls when you can at least get some of the nonverbal cues on a video call that simply cannot on an audio-only one? Agree to disagree, but it is like 16 people with blank stares at their screen. In a room, it is way more natural. On a call, I can pace around and don't care how I'm presenting to everyone. Depends on where you are in your career and who your audience is. If I'm on a video call, it also means collared shirt, usually buttoned down. Yes, I would not accept this job. Yes, it's red flag. I don't want to spend my time on way to work. Absolutely. I'm glad that I'm a good enough dev that I'll never have to even consider working for such a company ever again. Anytime I'm headhunted by an in-office company, I burn that bridge to the ground. I consider it a service to their current and future devs. My current job is fully in office. I started with freelance, and my first FT position was fully remote, so this is my first in-office job in software development. With my current company, this requirement centers around management's inability to organize plan. They'd never admit to it, but it's absolutely main reason behind it, which means they rely on a fair bit of micromanagement. Is it annoying AF? Yes. Could be a lot worse? Yes. Am I getting used to it? Yes. Will I probably still look for another job once I hit the 9-month mark? Yes. So yeah, next time I start looking, 100% in office will 100% be a red flag for me. Why 9 months? This only my guess, because by the time they actually obtain another position, give notice, and leave that job, they will likely have at least a full year in their current position to add to their resume. Even in this field, less than a year at a non-contract position can make a candidate look potentially sketchy. Bingo. I only accept fully remote roles at this point. Even hybrid is a big no from me. Working from home full-time enables my fiancé and myself to have a single vehicle household, spend more time together, lets me help with stuff around the apartment while she's at work, and enables me to be in a truly silent, focused work environment. You couldn't pay me enough to work hybrid or full-time in office ever again. I personally think a company that requires me to work at all is old-fashioned. I don't think I'd be able to do it, especially since everything is all that open office crap now. I can't concentrate on coding if there's people yapping left and right all around me. Yes. Yes, it's a red flag, and no, I wouldn't consider the job. It really depends on the type of work. Remote work doesn't make sense for everything. Personally, I'm not even considering any job offer that is not 100% remote. Yes and no old-fashioned. It will depend on the industry you are working in. E.g., if the job is engineering construction, then you may not have a large IT team, and you may be working in a department, and in that case, it's often beneficial to be in the office while the rest of the team is. Kind of need more info to say. If it's an IT company, then yes, it's extremely old-fashioned. It's extremely out of touch. Remote-first companies work more efficiently and can tap into much more international talent. Yes. If they pay me enough, I'll do it. I am one of the only few, it seems, that don't mind coming into office. So mostly I am there 5 days a week, but somehow I get things done more there than at home. But maybe that's because I am all alone at home. I guess I need the social recharge. At the same time, I can understand most people want to work at home. Edit. Forgot to answer the thread question. No, I don't think it's old-fashioned. Everyone has their preferences, what works best for them. I prefer to go in every day as well, mostly because my house is reserved for me and my family, and I don't want work barging in on it. I definitely don't like to work from home. I walk over to the library if I can't go in for some reason. However, I probably wouldn't take a job that was 100% in person. Even though I don't want to work from home, I know most everyone else does. A job that turns down the biggest developer perk probably does a lot of things wrong. Personally, I would think that they are old-fashioned and consider it a red flag. The ones that did require that from developers were indeed really old-fashioned and loved things like waterfall, 8 by 1 hour meetings in a single day, and top-down management approach in Europe. I know there are people who don't consider it a red flag because they have reasons to go to the office as much as possible. Reasons like they want to socialize because they're living alone. They want to get away from their crying kids. Their jobs require full-time meetings, etc. I'd rather stay productive, sleep longer, drink better coffee, and don't have to spend hours in a car to work less productive than I do when I work from home. Totally. I only work 100% remote. Sort of. There are a lot of FANG job postings that aren't remote or hybrid, and I don't really think you can call the industry leaders old-fashioned lol. For anyone else, though, yeah, if you're a smaller company and you require your devs to come in every day, to me, that's a sign of lack of trust. Yes and no old-fashioned. It will depend on the industry you are working in, e.g. if the job is engineering/construction, then you may not have a large IT team, and you may be working in a department, and in that case, it's often beneficial to be in the office while the rest of the team is. Kind of need more info to say. If it's an IT company, then yes, it's extremely old-fashioned. You can definitely call them old-fashioned, and it's been well documented too. Just because they're big doesn't mean they know what they're doing, which anyone who has worked in a large organization can attest to. I wouldn't consider it old-fashioned, but I'd be pretty worried that it would be like my old jobs where they were pretty controlling about time management and hours in office. I also wouldn't work there. I would never again work in an office. It's a personal choice. There are people who don't mind, some even prefer, a hybrid or in-person setup. I've been remote for well over a decade now and couldn't imagine returning to the office, even in a part-time hybrid capacity. I would not consider roles that aren't 100% remote. Even before COVID hit, I could work from home anytime. If a company doesn't allow me to do that, then it's just a straight no-go from me. 100% old-fashioned. It's helpful for starting out to be in an office with your team. I think it's great for learning quickly. But after a year, I'm done with it. I would not choose a job that's fully in person. I'd consider it pure garbage, not just old-fashioned. Programmer here. If I ever had to switch a job, I would turn down all offers that are not at least 80% remote, so I will allow 1 day in the office per week. Worked at the same company for about 8 years now. I had to go there by car every day, 40-minute drive per direction, plus 15-minute walk by foot. Bad parking places, that's the nearest parking place. I did not have another job before, so I could not compare. However, I liked the job, projects, general atmosphere, etc., so it was okay for me. Then came COVID with 1.5 years of full remote work. Can't remember. After COVID, we switched to a 1 day per week in office plan to test things out. The CEO already mentioned we might switch to 2 or 3 days per week later in a meeting with all colleagues. Loud and honest as I am, I already said I would quit my job then, for everyone's laughter, except CEOs. Felt like an IRL version of the meme where the honest guy gets thrown out of the office window. It has been 3 years since that meeting. We are still on a 1 day setup. And the 1 day we all meet at the office, we have by far the lowest productivity. Last week, I didn't get to code a single line of code until after lunch because of small talk here, taking orders for lunch there, physical scrum meeting that ended in, you guessed it, small talk. And of course, we all leave early that day since some of us need up to an hour to get home, and we had fresh snowfall. It's easier to fetch up 1 to 2 hours from Wednesday throughout the week when working from home, so a 40-hour week is more like 6 on Wednesday and 8 times 5 the other weekdays. I guess the current setup is working out for everyone at our small company. I just hope that the CEO also feels like this and does not want back more control over us. 5 days a week is old-fashioned. The only reason any tech companies do this at all is because they spent all the money on the building and they want to maximize people in the office to justify the cost. Also, depending on the company, some micromanagers don't believe people working from home are doing work and just slacking off. A half-decent run company will acknowledge that as long as your employees are delivering, it shouldn't really matter where they are delivering code from. Also, on-site sucks when you factor in commute to and from the office, also takes up your time. I currently work hybrid, and my last company was fully remote. Although I don't love the hybrid side, my boss is really flexible and doesn't really care if I come in or not, or how often, because I deliver. Mind you, this is filtered through Reddit and all of us non-social types. Yes, in-person work requirements is very old-fashioned at this point. If you can figure out how to get work done with video collaboration tools available, being in person isn't going to solve those problems. Not old-fashioned, but rather a red flag for sure. To me, it screams that the manager is a control freak and doesn't trust their employees at all. It's usually the excuse that the team loves working on site and one home office a week is optional, but we'd like if you came in 5 times a week so you are not an outsider with the colleagues because team spirit is important to us. A different perspective from everyone else here. I'm still in my first position, and it's fully in office, with flexibility to WFH sometimes. Being a junior in my first dev role over a couple of years, I can't tell you how beneficial it has been for me to just look over and ask questions or see how a much more senior dev does it. It's so much easier than potentially missing some context over Zoom or Slack or whatever. That being said, I absolutely see how pointless it is most of the time for devs to be in office. I can do everything I do now from home. There really is no reason for a dev to waste an hour plus per day on a commute, take the time to get ready to go, spend the gas money, and get less done. So yeah, in future job searches, I absolutely would consider full in-office a big red mark against a company. I don't really know if old-fashioned, but I prefer hybrid much better than full office. Yep, I told my last company that for a developer they felt old-fashioned, due in part to the 5 days in-office policy. At the risk of massive downvotes, I will say that I think it depends on the level of the developer and how they work as a person as well as the industry. I'm personally not a huge fan of junior devs just being fully remote. I think there is a lot you need to learn that isn't just task-oriented, and while told have come a long way, juniors who hit the industry during COVID are behind. Does that mean I think that 100% in office is the answer? No. But I think the first 3 to 6 months benefit both new juniors and new mentors to have a shared space to learn and to learn to teach. After that, I personally believe it's really a question of how the person can be best utilized. In terms of industry playing a role in this, I think that development groups that work closely with their business partners and customers are the most successful in delivering successful solutions. Often that means being able to meet those people where they're at. As I am on my own journey as a geriatric millennial in tech, trying to climb the ladder and become a leader, I think we need to build a better system and structure to keep our industry healthy and continue to develop and grow our talent. I don't believe that will happen in an enforced 100% remote environment any more than it will with 100% in-person one. Long answer to say that depending on industry, I would find that company to be old-fashioned, but that isn't necessarily a red flag for me. I'm a fan of places like that where I can generally make a difference by helping to push the mindset of the company forward and really are differences that I'm able to make versus just being assigned tickets. As I am on my own journey as a geriatric millennial in tech, trying to climb the ladder and become a leader, I think we need to build a better system and structure to keep our industry healthy and continue to develop and grow our talent. This is key. I think juniors mostly struggled because we as companies and industries didn't yet develop a proper way of communicating and collaborating remotely, and were just pushed into it by COVID. But remote is not going away. We will need to learn how to work with each other, and even learn from each other remotely, rather than dragging our feet on the ground about it. I don't disagree about remote not going away and needing a better way to work and collaborate. As things sit today, there is a generation of developers that are hurting their development by insisting they be 100% remote.